Welcome to the Systems Thinking Marin website. I'm Felicia Chavez, and I started Systems Thinking Marin in August of 2017. So in this short video, I want to give you just a very brief introduction to the field of systems thinking, and then I'll tell you a bit about the organization. So first, briefly, systems thinking is, as I've been telling people, I've realized myself, about relationships. And that means relationships between people and the environment, and relationships between principles, abstract principles. So systems thinking is really about that relationship between. So while linear thinking helps us to address things quickly in the short term, systems thinking helps us to address the bigger picture for the long term. It's also differentiated from the more linear conventional thinking in that linear conventional thinking relies on analysis and tends towards a more mechanistic view of the world. And systems thinking is everything is fair game in terms of knowing. So that will potentially include things like analysis, but in this much broader spectrum of the human experience. I have created Systems Thinking Marin largely inspired by a systems thinking platform called Theory U, which is out of MIT. I want to focus on Marin systems, and that's what the point of the organization is, but I want to mention a couple of bits from Theory U that underlie the systems thinking approach. Number one is this idea out of Theory U that is essentially phrased helping the system to become conscious of itself. And that can mean any number of things, and I'll get to an example of how that's taking shape in a moment. The other is raising the level of consciousness in the system. And one aspect of that is another phrase related to Theory U, which is moving from ego system to ecosystem economies. So since August 2017, when Systems Thinking Marin began, I've had the pleasure of interviewing at least 40 local individuals who have been in this field of social equity in particular, some of them for decades in Marin County. So that project of interviewing people was spurred from coming late to the table, but nevertheless helping to put on the Marin Equity Summit in November of 2017. So that was an opportunity for me to become more conscious of the local systems in Marin County. One of the reasons for doing those interviews is partially to find out about the systems thinking type work that's already happening in Marin, so that I can then hopefully write a blog about that, or at least talk about it with other people. And a lot of people taking a systems thinking approach to work in Marin County may not use the language of systems thinking. So I'm contextualizing it to make this point about the importance of a systemic approach to solving local challenges. One of the bits that I've heard repeatedly in those interviews is essentially people saying, you know, we're kind of turfy here in Marin County. We don't do a phenomenal job of working across organizations and coordinating efforts, or across sectors and coordinating efforts to create the world that we want to see here locally. So I'll mention briefly the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because this platform of 17 goals that was crafted by 193 member countries of the UN and put out to the world in 2015, I see as a particularly unique and dynamic opportunity for us here in Marin County to potentially embrace those goals, make them our own, locally applicable, create indicators for what we would like to see here, and work across sectors. So that would mean across economic development, across ecological or environmental activism, and social justice or social equity. So thank you for tuning in to Systems Thinking Marin and this website, which is meant to give you just at least the beginning of a window into systems thinking. So while I invite you to email me, felicia.chavez@gmail.com, fill out the contact form, make a donation, show up to an event, the most important thing is to educate yourself. And hopefully through that education, you will then bring greater awareness to the systemic approach you're already taking in some of your activities. Maybe you'll find it useful to embrace the language, we could say the jargon of systems thinking in some way, shape, or form in your work. I'm available to show up and speak with you, speak with a group about systems thinking and give you kind of an intro and point you in some directions of consultants or tools or books or anything that might be helpful or useful to help bring a greater grounding in systems thinking intentionally into your work and hopefully into our local community.